Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Nathan Boyd, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Commander Ivanka Zeko. This evening's last post ceremony commemorates the 80th anniversary of the sinking of the HMAS Yarra during the Second World War on the 4th of March, 1942. On the 27th of February 1942, orders were given to clear all remaining British auxiliary craft from Batavia, modern-day Jakarta. At about midnight, HMAS Yarra and the Indian sloop HMIS Jamna sailed, escorting a convoy to Cilacap, an ocean port on the south coast of Java. As the sun rose on the morning of the 4th of March, Yarra's lookout sighted the unmistakable topmast of a Japanese heavy cruiser squadron. The squadron consisted of Atago, Takao, and Maya, each armed with 8-inch guns, and accompanying them were 2 additional destroyers. Yarra was outgunned and outranged, and the enemy ships were faster. Against such odds, her task was hopeless. Yet she kept fighting, even as her convoy was overwhelmed and sunk ship by ship. Yarra, shattered by numerous hits, was the last to go. Soon after 8 o'clock, Lieutenant Commander Rankin ordered that the ship be abandoned. He was killed minutes later when an 8-inch salvo hit the bridge. Leading Seaman Taylor, manning the last remaining gun, kept firing until he too was killed, and the Yarra's guns fell silent. After close-range shelling by 2 Japanese destroyers, 34 survivors on 2 rafts saw Yarra sink. Of the ship's complement of 151, 138, including the captain and all officers, were killed in action or died on the rafts whilst awaiting rescue. This evening, we remember the sailors of the HMAS Yarra, whose names are listed on the memorial's roll of honour, and the survivors who returned home. We are honoured to acknowledge Mr. John King, President of the Return and Services League of Australia, ACT branch, representatives of the Naval Association, and Duntroon Special Service Officers Course. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of a pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance of the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who gave their lives for us in war and on operation for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will be laid at base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Engine Room Artificer, 4th Class, Don Allan Adams. Don Adams was born in Fremantle, Western Australia, on the 15th of February 1907, the son of Henry and Edith Adams. He grew up in Fremantle, where he first entered the Royal Australian Navy in 1928 as a yeoman of signals, a signals engineering specialist. 3 years later, he was discharged and released from engagement. After working for the Western Australian Government Railways as a teenager, he went on to work as a fitter. On the 29th of August 1934, John Adams married Minnie May Thompson in Perth. After a period of living in Western Subiaco in Fremantle, the family moved to Perth suburb of Clermont. Adams was a member of the Royal Australian Naval Reserve, and with the advent of the Second World War, was mobilised. First reporting for duty on the 6th of June 1940, he completed training at HMAS Cerberus, the Navy's initial training base at Western Port Bay, southeast of Melbourne. Given his experience as a fitter, he was appointed Engine Room Artificer 4th Class. Engine Room Artificer 4th Class were qualified fitters and turners with detailed knowledge of ships' engineering equipment. On the 5th of July 1941, Engine Room Artificer 4th Class Allan Adams joined HMAS Yarra. Named for the Yarra River in Victoria, the Grimsby-class sloop had been commissioned in 1936. Yarra's initial war service involved patrol and escort duties in Australia's waters. In August 1940, however, she shaped course for the Middle East and commenced convoy escort work in the theatre. In April 1941, she escorted a convoy from Bombay to the Persian Gulf and took part in campaigns against Iraq and Iran. By the time that Adams joined her ship's company, Yarra had returned from refit at Bombay and was operating as part of the Tobruk ferry service in the Mediterranean during November 1941. With the outbreak of war with Japan, Yarra sailed for the Javanese waters, arriving in January 1942. Here she again undertook escort and patrol duties, including a particular fine piece of rescue work when she took 1,800 survivors off the burning troop ship Express of Asia. On the 27th of February, orders were given to clear all remaining British auxiliary craft from Batavia, our modern-day Jakarta. At about midnight, Yarra and the Indian slope HMIS Yunmana sailed escorting a convoy of Charlachamp, an ocean port on the south coast of Java. Yarra was ordered to take the convoy, which consisted of the depot ship Anking, the tanker Frankel, and the motor minesweeper MMS 51 to Fremantle, while Yamna sailed for Colombo. No time was to be lost, as powerful Japanese forces were known to be operating in the waters of south of Java. Steaming steadily southeast, Yarra and her convoy made steady progress, except for a faintly discerned shadowing aircraft sighted in the evening. There was no sign of this enemy. On the morning of the 3rd of March, 2 lifeboats were sighted, and Yarra picked up a number of exhausted sailors off the Dutch merchant ship Parigi, which had been sunk by the Japanese 2 days earlier. As the sun rose the next morning, Yarra's lookout sighted the unmistakable topmast of a Japanese heavy cruiser squadron. The squadron consisted of Atago, Takayo, and Mayo, each armed with 10 8-inch guns. Accompanying them were an additional 2 destroyers. Lieutenant Commander Rankin made a sighting report, ordered the ships of the convoy to scatter, and placing his ship between them and the enemy, laid smoke and prepared to engage. Yarra was outgunned and outranged, and the enemy ships were faster. Against such odds, her task was hopeless, yet she kept fighting, even as her convoy was overwhelmed and sunk, ship by ship. Anking, which was carrying many RAN personnel, was sunk first. Overwhelmed by many hits, she was dispatched in 10 minutes. By then, Yarra was on fire and listing heavily to port, but still shooting. MMS 51 was on fire and was put down shortly after a hail of close-range automatic gunfire from one of the cruisers. The Frankel took more punishment and still remained afloat. Finally, scumbling at about 0730, Yarra, shattered by numerous hits, was the last to go. Soon after 800, Rankin ordered that the ship was abandoned. He was killed minutes later when an 8-inch salvo hit the bridge. Leading Seaman Taylor, manning the last remaining gun, kept firing until he too was killed. and the Yarra's gun fell silent. After close-range shelling by the 2 Japanese destroyers, 34 survivors on 2 rafts saw Yarra sink. Having picked up a boatload of survivors, the Japanese made off to the northeast, leaving a collection of boats, rafts and floats scattered over a wide area of sea. Towards evening, a passing Dutch vessel, Tawali, rescued 57 officers and men, 57 officers and men. But in spite of frantic signals, she failed to sight 2 curly floats, which held 14 men from the MMS 51. By the next 2.5 days, they drifted about until picked up by the Dutch steamer Taimang Pro. Meanwhile, Yarra's men, their numbers reduced by wounds, exposure and thirst, continued to drift hopelessly. On the 9th of March, 13 of the sloop's ratings were picked up by a Dutch submarine. Of the ship's complement of 151, 138, including the captain and all officers, were killed in action or died on the raft. Among the dead was John Adams. He was 35 years old. With no grave but the sea, today he's remembered at the Plymouth Naval Memorial, which commemorates 7,251 sailors of the First World War, 15,933 of the Second World War. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among some 440,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Engine Room Artificer, 4th Class, John Allan Adams, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They have no grave but the cruel sea. No flowers lay at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and your continued support for the Memorials Development Project. We particularly appreciate your visit despite the challenges posed by COVID and wish you all a very pleasant evening.